My cousin Derek showed up at my equipment yard with a lawyer, a cameraman, and the absolute certainty that he was about to become a millionaire off my failed business. "We're documenting everything for the lawsuit," he announced, his phone already recording as he walked past my trucks like he owned them. Partnership dissolution requires a full inventory of assets. What Derek didn't realize, what his cheap lawyer clearly hadn't researched, was that the Defunct landscaping company he was trying to claim half of had just been awarded the largest municipal maintenance contract in our city's history, and I was 3 signatures away from expanding into 2 neighboring counties. His $2,000 seed money from 5 years ago? My company's annual revenue was $4.7 million. But Derek still saw me as the cousin who used to mow lawns for pocket change. He was about to get an education. The lawsuit had arrived 2 weeks earlier, delivered to my home address because Derek didn't even know where my actual office was located. Complaint for partnership dissolution and accounting, the header read. Derek Hoffman vs. Natalie Hoffman D/B/A Hoffman Landscaping Services. According to the filing, Derek had invested $2,000 in my business 5 years ago in exchange for a 50% partnership interest. He claimed I had systematically excluded him from business decisions, concealed financial information, and converted partnership assets for my personal use. He wanted half of everything. The trucks, the equipment, the client list, the bank accounts. The whole thing was a fantasy built on a single conversation we'd had at a family barbecue in 2020. I'd been starting my landscaping business after getting laid off from my corporate job. Derek, who had just gotten a bonus from his sales position, had handed me $2,000 in cash and said, "Here, cuz. Get yourself some decent equipment. When you make it big, you can pay me back double." That was it. No paperwork. No partnership agreement. No discussion of equity or ownership or anything remotely resembling a business arrangement. Just a cousin helping another cousin during a hard time. I'd paid him back $4,000 within 18 months, double, exactly as he'd suggested. I had the canceled check to prove it. I'd considered us square. Apparently, Derek had other ideas. The thing about landscaping is that everyone thinks they understand it. You mow grass, trim hedges, plant flowers. Simple work for simple people. That perception had been my greatest advantage. When I'd started Hoffman Landscaping Services, I'd recognized immediately that residential work was a race to the bottom. Every teenager with a push mower was my competition. Homeowners haggled over every dollar, complained about every imperfection, and dropped you the moment someone cheaper came along. So I'd pivoted. Hard. I'd gotten my commercial pesticide applicator license, my irrigation certification, my arborist credentials. I'd studied municipal bid processes until I could write proposals in my sleep. I'd built relationships with city planners, corporate facility managers, and property developers. Within 2 years, I wasn't mowing lawns anymore. I was maintaining the grounds for City Hall, 3 public parks, the regional airport, and the corporate campus of the largest employer in the county. Within 5 years, I had 47 employees, a fleet of specialized equipment worth $1.2 million, and contracts that guaranteed revenue for the next decade. But to my family, I was still Natalie with her little lawn business. I'd never corrected them. I'd learned early that success in my family was treated like a pie. If I had a bigger slice, someone else must have less. Better to be underestimated than resented. Derek's lawsuit proved I'd been right to hide. But now hiding wasn't an option anymore. I hired a lawyer named Constance Webb, a commercial litigation specialist with a reputation for destroying frivolous claims. She reviewed Derek's complaint with the expression of someone examining a particularly offensive piece of garbage. "There's no written partnership agreement," she noted. "No operating agreement, no documented equity split, no evidence of his involvement in business operations. Because there was no partnership. He gave me $2,000 and I paid him back $4,000. You have documentation of the repayment?" I handed her a folder. Cancelled check, dated March 2022. $4,000 to Derek Hoffman, memo line reading, repayment plus interest. Constance smiled. "He cashed this?" "Same week I sent it. And he's now claiming a 50% partnership interest in a business where he contributed $2,000, received $4,000 back, and has had no involvement for 5 years? That's his position. Ms. Hoffman, I'm going to enjoy this case very much." She closed the folder. "The court will likely appoint a forensic accountant to evaluate the business and determine if any partnership existed. I want you to cooperate fully. Open every book, show every contract, document every asset. Won't that tell Derek exactly how much the business is worth?" "That's precisely the point." Constance leaned forward. "Right now, Derek thinks you're struggling. He thinks he's going to squeeze a few $1,000s out of a failing company. When he sees what you've actually built, and realizes his partnership claim is worth nothing because he was already paid back, the shock alone will be worth the legal fees. Derek, naturally, couldn't resist gloating during the discovery period. He showed up at our grandmother's 80th birthday party, neutral ground, he probably figured, and cornered me by the punch bowl. Natalie. Looking good for someone about to lose half her business. He was wearing a new watch, probably bought on credit against his anticipated windfall. My lawyer says this should be wrapped up in a few months. Maybe you should just settle now, save us both the trouble. What do you think is fair, Derek? Well, I put in $2,000 when you had nothing. Without me, there'd be no business at all. I figure 50% is more than fair, but I'd take 40 to keep things friendly. 40% of what? He waved vaguely. The trucks, the equipment, whatever contracts you have left. I know things have been slow, I drove by your old house and the trailer's gone. Business must be rough. The trailer he was referring to was a small equipment trailer I'd used in my first year. I'd sold it for $3,000 when I upgraded to a proper facility, the 12,000 square foot equipment yard and office complex he'd never bothered to find. Things are fine, Derek. Sure they are. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. Look, I'm not trying to bankrupt you. I just want what's mine. We're family, after all. Yes, we are. Our grandmother appeared, saving me from saying something I'd regret. I spent the rest of the party helping in the kitchen, far away from Derek's victory lap. But I made sure to smile at him as I left. He had no idea what was coming. The forensic accountant appointed by the court was a woman named Priya Venkatesh, mid-40s, CPA credentials that went on for 2 pages, and the focused intensity of someone who'd unraveled corporate frauds for Fortune 500 companies. She arrived at my equipment yard on a Tuesday morning, briefcase in hand, prepared to examine a small landscaping operation. She was still there at 7 p.m. Derek had insisted on being present for the assessment, his legal right, according to his lawyer. He'd arrived expecting to count a few rusty mowers and some hand tools. Instead, he found himself standing in the dispatch center of a commercial grounds maintenance operation that ran like a military campaign. This is your office? Derek stared at the wall-mounted screens showing real-time GPS tracking of my fleet. 12 trucks, currently deployed across the city. Since when do you have an office? Since 2021. You never asked. Priya was already moving through the facility with methodical precision. She photographed the equipment bay, where specialized machinery worth more than Derek's house sat in neat rows. She documented the chemical storage facility, properly licensed and inspected. She examined the maintenance logs, the safety certifications, the employee training records. Then she asked to see the contracts. Of course, I said. They're in the file room. The file room was climate-controlled, a requirement for storing municipal documents. 3 walls of filing cabinets contained 5 years of business records, bids submitted, contracts won, invoices paid, relationships documented. Priya pulled the first folder from the cabinet marked Active Municipal. She read the first page. Then the second. Then she set the folder down and looked at me with an expression I'd come to recognize over the years, the look of someone realizing they'd dramatically underestimated the situation. Ms. Hoffman, is this current? Signed last month. 5-year term with 2 5-year renewal options. This is the City of Riverside Comprehensive Grounds Maintenance Contract. Yes. The entire city? All municipal properties. City Hall, fire stations, parks, public works facilities, the library system. 47 locations total. Derek appeared in the doorway. What's going on? What's in that folder? Priya didn't answer. She was pulling more folders, scanning contents, her expression shifting from surprise to something approaching awe. Regional Airport Authority, she read aloud. 5-year exclusive maintenance agreement. Value, $1.3 million annually. Derek's face went gray. Morrison Tech Campus. Exclusive grounds contract. 7 buildings, 200 acres. Priya looked up. This is one of the largest employers in the county. They've been a client since 2022. Westfield Medical Center. Riverside Unified School District. First National Bank Corporate Headquarters. Priya was flipping through folders faster now, pulling documents, making notes. Ms. Hoffman, how many active commercial contracts do you currently hold? 34 major contracts. Plus ongoing relationships with about 60 smaller commercial properties. Derek made a sound like someone had punched him in the stomach. Priya set down her pen and turned to face him directly. Mr. Hoffman, I need to understand your claim. You're asserting a 50% partnership interest in this business based on a $2,000 investment 5 years ago? Yes. She couldn't have started without me. I see. Priya pulled out her calculator. Based on my preliminary review, Ms. Hoffman's company has annual revenues exceeding $4 million. Asset value, equipment, vehicles, facilities, exceeds $2 million. The contract portfolio, valued conservatively at remaining contract value, is worth approximately $12 million over the next 5 years. She looked at Derek with the patient expression of a teacher explaining something to a struggling student. Your $2,000 investment, at the most generous possible interpretation, would represent 0.025% of current business value. However, I've also found documentation of a $4,000 payment to you in 2022, which appears to be full repayment of your initial contribution plus 100% interest. She was just being nice. It wasn't a buyout. The memo line of the check reads, repayment plus interest. You cashed it within 3 days. Priya closed her notebook. Mr. Hoffman, I'll be submitting my full report to the court, but I can tell you now that I find no evidence of an ongoing partnership arrangement. What I find is evidence of a loan that was repaid in full, and a subsequent lawsuit that appears to be based on, let's call it, creative memory. Derek's lawyer, who had been standing silently in the corner reviewing documents he clearly hadn't expected to see, finally spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss settlement options. Settlement? I stepped forward, 5 years of hidden frustration finally finding its voice. Derek showed up at our grandmother's birthday party bragging about how he was going to take half my business. He's been telling the whole family that I'm struggling, that he's doing me a favor by partnering with me. He hired a cameraman to document my failing company. I gestured at the facility around us, the trucks, the equipment, the operation I'd built from nothing while my family assumed I was barely surviving. There is no settlement. There's Derek withdrawing his lawsuit, paying my legal fees, and explaining to everyone he's been lying to that he made a mistake. Derek's face had gone from gray to red. You can't just, I helped you. I believed in you when no one else did. You gave me $2,000 and I gave you back $4,000. That's not believing in me, Derek. That's a loan with interest. A loan that was paid in full 3 years ago. This isn't fair. Fair? I laughed, actually laughed, which I hadn't expected. You want to talk about fair? I built this company working 18-hour days for 3 years. I learned every certification, won every bid, hired every employee, solved every problem. I turned a lawnmower and a pickup truck into a $4 million company. You contributed nothing except $2,000 that you've already been paid back, and now you're claiming you deserve half. I stepped closer to my cousin, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. That's not unfair, Derek. That's delusional. The court hearing 3 weeks later was almost anticlimactic. Priya Venkatesh submitted her report, comprehensive, devastating, and professionally damning. She found no evidence of any partnership agreement, verbal or written. She documented the repayment of Derek's initial contribution. She valued the business at over $6 million in total assets and contract value. She also noted, with careful professional language, that the plaintiff's claims appeared to be inconsistent with documentary evidence and potentially motivated by recent discovery of the defendant's business success rather than any legitimate partnership claim. Derek's lawyer tried to argue that the $4,000 payment was a dividend rather than repayment, proving that a partnership existed. Judge Morrison, a former business attorney himself, looked at him with undisguised contempt. Counselor, your client received double his initial investment within 18 months, cashed the check immediately, and made no further claims of partnership for 3 years, until, apparently, he discovered the business had become successful. That's not a dividend. That's a repaid loan and a disappointed relative. He turned to Derek, who had shrunk into his chair like a deflating balloon. Mr. Hoffman, I'm dismissing this case with prejudice. I'm also ordering you to pay the defendant's legal fees, which, he glanced at Constance's submitted invoice, amount to $34,000. Additionally, I'm referring your attorney to the State Bar for review, as this lawsuit appears to have been filed without adequate investigation into its factual basis. Derek's lawyer went pale. Finally, Judge Morrison continued, I want to note for the record that Ms. Hoffman has built what appears to be an exemplary business. The municipal contracts, the commercial relationships, the employee safety record, all suggest a professional operation that benefits this community. The fact that a family member attempted to claim half of this through a fabricated partnership claim is, frankly, disgraceful. He signed the dismissal order with a flourish. Case dismissed. Mr. Hoffman, I'd suggest finding a different approach to your financial difficulties than suing successful relatives. Outside the courthouse, Derek tried one last time. Natalie, wait. Please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I didn't know. I thought you were struggling like the rest of us. Mom said you were barely making ends meet. Everyone said your business was failing. Everyone said what they wanted to believe. I finally turned to face him. Nobody asked. Nobody visited. Nobody showed any interest in what I was actually doing. You all just assumed I was the family disappointment, and you liked it that way. That's not. Derek, you showed up with a cameraman. You wanted to film my humiliation. You bragged to Grandma about taking half my business. You weren't trying to help a struggling cousin. You were trying to steal from a successful one. He had no response to that. The legal fees are $34,000, I continued. The court ordered you to pay them. If you can't pay, I'm sure we can work out a payment plan. But Derek? I stepped closer. If you ever try anything like this again, if you ever come after my business, my employees, or my reputation, I will not be merciful a second time. I will pursue every legal remedy available, and I will make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. I walked away without waiting for a response. The family fallout was immediate and messy. Derek, apparently, had been telling everyone that his lawsuit was going to net him at least $100,000. He'd borrowed money against his expected windfall. He'd made promises he couldn't keep. When word spread that he'd not only lost but had been ordered to pay my legal fees, the family split into predictable camps. Some sided with Derek. She should have shared her success with family, my Aunt Patricia declared, conveniently ignoring that sharing was different from being legally robbed. Others were shocked they'd been lied to. My Uncle Martin called to apologize. I had no idea you'd built something like that. Derek made it sound like you were barely surviving. I should have asked you directly. Yes, I agreed. You should have. Grandma called me the week after the hearing. Natalie, honey, I've been thinking about this mess with Derek. I'm sorry it happened, Grandma. I didn't want family drama. Oh, hush. Derek made his own drama. She paused. But I want to understand something. You built a big company, millions of dollars, that accountant said. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? I was quiet for a moment, trying to find words for something I'd never articulated. Because when I was starting out, I told Uncle Robert I'd gotten my first commercial contract. He asked me for a loan the same day. When I mentioned to Aunt Patricia that business was picking up, she suggested I should hire her son, the one who got fired from 3 jobs, because family helps family. Every time I shared good news, someone had their hand out. So you stopped sharing? I stopped sharing. And everyone assumed I was failing, and I let them assume it because at least they left me alone. Grandma was quiet for a long time. That's a sad way to live, sweetheart. Hiding from your own family. It's the way I survived, Grandma. And it's the way I built something nobody could take from me, until Derek tried. Well. Her voice firmed up. I've had words with his mother. And I've had words with everyone else who's been gossiping. You built something to be proud of, Natalie. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about that. Thank you, Grandma. And next time you get a big contract, you call me first. I won't ask for money. I just want to be proud of my granddaughter. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Deal. 6 months later, I won the contract for the new county courthouse grounds, a $2.3 million project that made the local business news. The article included my photo and a brief company history. It mentioned that Hoffman Landscaping Services had grown from a 1-woman operation to a 47-person team in just 5 years. It quoted the county facilities manager calling my company the gold standard for municipal grounds maintenance in the region. Derek sent me a text message the day the article ran. Congratulations on the courthouse contract. I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Some apologies are too late to matter. But I did frame the article. I hung it in my office, right next to my first commercial contract, the city park maintenance agreement that had started everything. 2 documents. 5 years apart. The whole story of what I'd built. Last month, I spoke at a small business conference downtown. The topic was scaling service businesses, but what I really talked about was the gap between perception and reality, how the businesses we dismiss as simple are often the ones generating real wealth, and how the entrepreneurs we underestimate are often the ones transforming their industries. Afterward, a young woman approached me. Early 20s, work boots, calloused hands. The look of someone who spent her days outside. Ms. Hoffman? I started a landscaping company last year. My family thinks I'm wasting my time. They keep asking when I'm going to get a real job. I smiled. What's your focus? Residential or commercial? Residential right now. But I want to break into commercial. I just don't know how. I handed her my card. Call my office Monday. I'll introduce you to my commercial development manager. We'll talk about certifications, bid processes, the contracts that are actually worth winning. Her eyes widened. Really? Why would you help me? I'm competition. Because someone helped me once. He gave me $2,000 when I was starting out, and I've never forgotten what that meant. I thought about Derek, about what he'd been versus what he'd become. The help was real. What he did with it later was his choice, not mine. Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Seriously. Thank me by building something worth building. And when your family realizes they were wrong about you, remember that you knew all along. She nodded, clutching my card like a lifeline. I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself, 5 years ago. They called my business Defunct. They claimed half of it for a $2,000 loan that had been repaid years ago. The forensic accountant found a $4.7 million company with exclusive contracts across the entire region. Derek thought he was going to become a millionaire off my work. Instead, he learned what happens when you try to steal from someone who never stopped building while you were busy assuming they'd failed. My grandmother was right, hiding from family is a sad way to live. But building something they can't take from you? That's not sad at all. That's survival. That's success. That's the difference between what people assume about you and what you know about yourself. And that's worth everything.